So when I'm talking to clients oftentimes about having to disclose a lot of the things that we're discussing right now, a big question I always get is like what's an example of a defect or material fact that we have to disclose? And I will tell you, there's not an all inclusive list to go by. It's not just a list that you can check off and say, all right, well, this was an issue, but it wasn't on the list, so I don't have to disclose it. Y'all, that's just not true. So there's not really per se, a list of things. The law just says you must disclose known defects and or material facts concerning the property. All right, so what are we dealing with, or what makes something a material fact? Typically a defect, that should be pretty self-explanatory. If something's not functioning, working the way it was intended to work, then that's a material defect. But what's a material fact? A material fact really can be anything that could cause an issue with the property, not functioning properly, can't use it the way it was intended to be used, or anything that could cause a loss of value. Could cause property to depreciate. Those are material facts. Okay. So and we look at some examples here. And again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but windows, doors, the structure. Obviously that's a big issue right there, if there is one. Appliances, if your appliances don't work, those things need to be disclosed. Repairs, and what they're talking about there is, if you've made significant repairs of some sort, like structural, foundation repairs, then that needs to be disclosed for a number of reasons. One, we want to make sure that it is in fact repaired, right? If I'm the buyer, I want to make sure I've got an inspector that knows what they're looking at and can assure me that everything is good. But a lot of times, especially when it comes to like foundation repair, these major repairs usually come with a warranty. So I would want to know about those things when I go to buy. Unpermitted renovations. Now, that's a biggie right there. Unfortunately, at least in my market that I'm in, it seems like agents and certainly homeowners kind of overlook this one, or just don't want to know about it. Don't want to take any actions here. But there is a law that requires with certain types of renovations, additions, require a permit to do it, right? From the building department. Before you build anything, you're supposed to get a permit from the building department. They have to approve what you're building, and there's kind of a lot that goes into that. And we're going to talk more about permits a little bit later. But what we're saying right here is, if the homeowner has done renovations that require a permit, but they did not get one, and I'm telling you, that is in fact, very few people seem to go get a permit when they're doing certain renovations. Well, if you don't get the permit, then you must disclose that this renovation was completed or this addition was added without a permit. That's a mandatory disclosure right there. Again, we'll talk more about permits here in a little bit. But if you have any pest or mold issues, environmental hazards, these are just some examples of things that must be disclosed. Just keep in mind, don't come back and say, well, but Frankie listed the things that we're having to disclose, and this issue I didn't disclose, not on the list. Okay, well, again, this is not an all-inclusive list, so I just want to be clear there. Here's another mandatory disclosure, and it's dealing with lead-based paint. I promise you, this will be on the exam. And not only will it be on the exam, but it's something you're going to be dealing with on a daily basis when you're practicing real estate. Lead-based paint is a environmental hazard for one, and it will clearly cause some safety and health issues for those that ingest lead-based paint. Now, why is this an issue? Because y'all, way back in the day, y'all guess what they would put in paint to make it more durable? Lead. Y'all, that's why we call it lead-based paint. Now, we liked lead-based paint because it was very durable, right? It would last longer. Unfortunately, it'll kill you, I guess. So anyway, in 1977, lead-based paint was outlawed, okay? And I'm giving you a lot more information you probably need right this second because we're going to be talking about this some more coming up. But just so you know, y'all, lead-based paint was outlawed. It was made illegal in 77. The reason that's important for real estate agents and anybody selling real estate, obviously if they're selling a home, for example, and it was built prior to 1978, is there a potential that there could be lead paint in that home? Yes, and I can just about tell you the chances are extremely high that there is lead paint in the house. Now, you may not see lead-based paint. Most people couldn't tell it if it was anyway, just by looking at it. But y'all, typically, they probably painted over it, probably painted several coats. Many different colors have been painted over it. But y'all, deep down underneath there, there could be some lead-based paint. There has to be disclosures made about this. We'll talk about that more when we get to it. But I will tell you that date, 1978, you better remember that date. Not only for test purposes, but when you're practicing real estate, if you list or helping someone buy a house that was built prior to 1978, you better believe there's a written mandatory disclosure about the potential of lead-based paint that's required. Okay? Asbestos. We've learned asbestos is very harmful for health and safety of people. But I'll tell you, asbestos, it was a very common building material. Again, back in the 70s and earlier. But asbestos is fire retardant for one. So you would think that'd be an awesome building material, something that does not burn, right? That's good. It's a very good insulator. So there are a lot of reasons why we used asbestos, but again, we've now learned asbestos is a health issue for people. So if there is asbestos in or on the property, that has to be disclosed. But any other health or safety risk, again, this is what we call these material facts, things that could cause issues. If you have knowledge of it, you must disclose it. So here they're just saying any other health and safety risk or issues are required to be disclosed to potential buyers. Now, what's the buyer's role in all of this? Now, we just talked about what the seller's role is in disclosing certain things. But buyer, here's what you better remember. And if you're the buyer's agent, you better make sure they know this. The seller is only required to disclose what they have knowledge of, right? Could there be lead paint in the house and the seller have no knowledge? Yes. In fact, more than likely. Could there be defects with the house and the seller have no knowledge of it, at least at that time? Absolutely. So buyer, you've got some obligations here as well. One, you want to review all the information that's provided by the seller. And by the way, in fact, contracts even state, buyer, you must review documents, home inspections, surveys, appraisals, or whatever. The contract lays out a lot of different documents that buyers need to be reviewing, and make sure it meets their requirements. Make sure they're okay with the content of these documents. Now, the problem is most buyers don't know what a lot of these things are, much less where to get them, how to obtain them. So, y'all, if you're the buyer's agent, y'all, this is your responsibility. Y'all, you're acting as a fiduciary on behalf of your buyer. So, yeah, even though the contract says buyer must review yada, dot, 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 dot. As the agent, you need to get those documents and provide them to your buyer. Go over them with the buyer. Now, look, what you don't want to do is act like the expert. If you're looking at a survey, for example, which you need to be doing, are you a surveyor? Chances are the answer is no. Then don't try to be the expert in surveys, all right? But if there's something that looks questionable, obviously if your buyer has a question about certain things, then you need to help them get the answer, but you don't need to be the source of the answer, because you're not the expert. Maybe talk to a surveyor. Best case scenarios, you can get like a 3-way conversation on the phone. Get the surveyor, the buyer, and you on the phone, because you need to be educated as much as possible as well. But sometimes that's just not practical and won't work out. But so maybe you can get the information from a surveyor, or whatever information you need to answer the buyer's question, and then provide that information to the buyer. So again, you weren't the source, or shouldn't be the source of the information. But when you're acting in that fiduciary capacity, you have an obligation to get that information for your client, right? So just be careful about some of this stuff for sure. But go through the documents, make sure there's no issues that could come back and haunt. Make sure you ask questions, if you need to. Ask questions, ask for clarification on certain matters. But then investigate. Get a home inspector. Get a surveyor. Whatever you need to ensure that you feel comfortable with the condition of the property. So the whole point right here is, buyer, you have some responsibilities here as well. It's not just on the seller. So is it possible the buyer could buy something? I say buy a house, for example, move in and then discover problems with the house that the seller never disclosed, and then you want to go back on the seller? Well, if you can prove that the seller knew about it and didn't disclose it, then you may have a leg to stand on there. But if the seller did not know about it, then you can't really blame the seller. They can't disclose something they have no knowledge of, right? So buyer, you have a lot of obligations and responsibilities in doing your due diligence as well. Okay. So what if we do have or find or made aware of issues? A lot of times the buyer may say, you know what, it's not that significant. Maybe I'm a pretty good handyman myself. I can take care of whatever this issue is myself. I'm just not worried about it. I want the house. And then obviously, then you can go ahead and buy it the way it is. Or, obviously you could renegotiate. We made typically when you make your offer, there's been no inspections to this point. So we make the offer based on the condition we are told that it's in. But then the home inspector goes out and finds issues that the seller did not know about. And obviously the buyer didn't know about it when they made their offer. So obviously, if we find let's say there's a foundation issue and it's going to cost $5,000 to repair it. And maybe I offered $300,000 on the property. Well, yeah, I'm willing to pay the $300,000, but that's if the foundation's in good condition, right? Good shape. And now we know it's not. So now we need to renegotiate this offer, this contract. Y'all, and there's obviously a lot of options here, and I'm not going to sit here and go through all of those right now. But obviously, seller could agree to make the repairs himself. Obviously, all this has to be done prior to closing, typically. Or maybe the buyer's willing to buy it with the foundation issues, but we're going to have to agree to drop the price some amount. Right? So, there are things that you can certainly renegotiate, in a way that hopefully makes everybody happy. We can do those things. Y'all clarify with the seller. Obviously, have the agent discuss the issue with the listing agent. Sometimes you can get an explanation that might reassure the buyer that everything is okay. Renegotiate sales price. These are things we just talked about. I just got ahead of myself on the slides, so I apologize for that. But if it's bad enough, whatever the issue is, obviously you could consider just backing out completely. As long as you're still within your due diligence period, and that due diligence period will be defined in the contract of sale. Just for example, it might say you have 10 business days, buyer, to have whatever inspections you want to have, and if you find something you can't live with, then potentially you could pull out, withdraw your offer without losing your earnest money. So you'd get your earnest money back. So, there are a lot of options available here. We just need to identify what those options are for each circumstance, and then figure out the best course of action. Okay. But when it comes to these undisclosed problems, obviously, if it's something the seller didn't know about, you can't blame the seller for not disclosing something if they did not know about it. But if you can show that they did know about it, or at least should have known about it for whatever reason, then you could have a legal claim against them for not disclosing certain things. Potentially you could sue for damages. I hate to even bring up lawsuits because I don't like them myself, but obviously that is a legal option for you. Some important considerations we list here that we really already talked about. Just know, the seller can only disclose what they have knowledge of. Buyer, you have some responsibility here to practice some due diligence, look into matters, get things inspected, and agent, if you're the buyer's agent, you have an obligation of due diligence. Make sure your buyer is making an informed decision. Provide them with the right information, suggestions, and so forth. Okay, but obviously at a minimum, I would always have a home inspection. If I'm the buyer or buyer's agent, I'm always recommending a home inspection. And by the way, a lot of times I get, what if it's a brand new home? Is there any need for a home inspection? You need a home inspection on a new home, probably more so than you would on a house that's been lived in before. Not going to go down that rabbit trail right now, but I'm telling you, new homes absolutely should be inspected. Okay. But here's another document I think you'll find to be very helpful potentially. And it's something called a clue report. The word clue is an acronym. I'm sure I've got it in your text there. I can't. It's kind of a long word there when you put it all together or spell it out. But anyway, we call it a clue report. And what this is, anytime, if you have like major damage, like the house floods, maybe a water line broke and flooded the house. So you got a lot of damage here. Who's the homeowner usually going to report this to? Their insurance company. They want the insurance to pay for these damages. Or if a tree falls on the house or damage the roof or whatever. We call the insurance company. Well, there's a database where insurance companies they'll log in all issues, any claims that are reported or filed against their insurance policy. And every insurance company has access to this database. And this is what they call the clue report. So if you were trying to get insurance on a property, the insurance company is going to go to the database, pull up this property, pull up this clue report, and it will identify any claims that have been made against the insurance company over the last however many years. That's a pretty big deal because obviously if there are no claims, and say they own the house for 10 years and there's been no claims, the insurance company is going to feel a lot more comfortable about writing an insurance policy against it. But if it looks like once or twice a year there's some kind of serious issue or a claim's been filed, if I'm the insurance company, I might say, you know what, I don't believe I even want to deal with this. I don't want to insure this property. So that's what a clue report is. Well, why this is important for you as the buyer, especially, I would like to know, has there been any serious, significant claims? Typically, if you file a claim with your insurance policy or insurance company, it's pretty significant. Some significant event has taken place and caused damage to the property. Well, if I'm the buyer, I'd want to know that. Now, hopefully, all of that's been fixed. All of it's been repaired, right? But if I've got and I know about it because I see this clue report, I could provide this report to my home inspector before they do the inspection and just say, look, this is something that happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. Please pay special attention to this area or whatever, just to make sure that any repairs made were done properly and there are no more issues here, right? Because, when you send a home inspector out, typically it's kind of like searching for a needle in a haystack. They don't know what kind of issues that may or may not exist. They're just going out looking. But if you point out certain things, now they know to specifically look at certain things. And that's what this clue report can help you with. So, they can be a pretty big deal. But, again, here you see the details of this clue report. In fact, it says here claims older than 7 years sometimes may not be listed there. So at least you can get at least 7 years worth of data or any significant claims that have been filed against that property. Okay, so that's a good thing. So what are the benefits? Obviously it helps the underwriter when they're trying to insure the property. But for buyers, it could uncover some hidden problems, things that you didn't know about. Because sometimes, even though things were fixed, maybe it wasn't fixed properly, and typically when things are not fixed properly, it's going to become an issue at some point in the future. So again, these are things that you want to be on the lookout for sure. Now, when it comes to obtaining the clue report, I think it just depends on the insurance company, has been my experience. But what I would suggest to the buyer is call your insurance, obviously if you're going to buy a house, you're going to have insurance. So if you don't have an insurance company that you use now, you're going to need to get one. So let's go ahead and figure that out right now. And then just tell them that you're looking at purchasing a property, give them the address, and hopefully they can provide you with the clue report to see if there's any major issues that have been reported. Now, I'm hearing, I typically don't have a problem doing what I just said, but occasionally I've had agents tell me that the insurance company would not provide it, that it can only be provided by the owner of the property, that it can only be requested by the owner of the property. And if that's the case, y'all then ask the owner to contact their insurance company, get a copy of the clue report, and provide it to you. You can make that as part of the contract, as a matter of fact. And it says here, typically at least once a year, you can get it for free. I don't know why they would ever charge for this, but at least once a year they have to provide it free. But again, they may have to go through the current homeowner to get it. But this is just something called the clue report. And I will tell you, it's worth the time and effort to get it. It could provide some pretty valuable information.